They say that a pessimist sees the glass half empty and an optimist sees the glass half full. But only a few people know that a scientist sees the glass as twice as big as it needs to be. Well, many things in our life depend on perspective. What's the difference between a spy and an intelligent agent? It depends which side you're on. I often hear the phrase that victors write the history. Today I would like to challenge this statement. Perhaps it's true that the version of events recorded and remembered is often biased in favor to the sides that emerge victorious, or I would say in favor of the side that is writing it. This leads to a distorted understanding of what actually happened, as the history that's passed down may not accurately reflect the complexities and nuances of the situation. I think it might be true for many periods of events, but not for all. I'm reminded of a classic formula that describes almost any Jewish festival. They wanted to kill us, we survived, let's eat. Although eventually they failed and we survived, in many, or probably in most cases, it would be inaccurate to call Jewish history victorious and glorious. The Jewish people outlived many of its enemies, but there were countless moments when we lost battles, when we lost wars, and were on the receiving end of many disasters. I would like to argue that many Jewish texts are an example of history written by a losing side. Let's take an example. So this is the Synagogue's hexagonal prism. It's a clay prism from an ancient Mesopotamia, dating back to the 8th or 7th century BCE. Discovered in the ruins of the palace of the king Sennacherib in Nineveh, the capital of the ancient Assyrian Empire. It's now displayed in the British Museum in London, so everybody here can go and look at it. The text of the prism describes Sennacherib's military campaigns during his reign as a king. The text on the prism has a very significant relationship to the Hebrew Bible because it contains a detailed account of the king's military campaign against the kingdom of Judah. According to the text of the Sennacherib captured and destroyed many cities in Judah, but led Jerusalem to remain independent, and the Judean king Hezekiah survived. And the obvious question is why? Everything around it was captured and destroyed, or at least this is how we lost 10 tribes. Most of the people disappeared afterwards. The main reason this text tells us that the main reason Jerusalem was not destroyed at the time and the kingdom of Judah maintained its sovereignty was that Sennacherib imposed heavy tribute on the kingdom, and they paid it. These same events are also described in the Hebrew Bible. In the second book of Kings, in chapter 19, it's recorded that Sennacherib, the name is the same by the way, Sennacherib besieged Jerusalem and demanded that King Hezekiah of Judah submit to his rule. Hezekiah consulted with the prophet, and the prophet was Isaiah at the time, and refused on the advice of Isaiah. And the city was saved when an angel of God struck down the Assyrian army, causing them to retreat. Scholars tend to see the Book of Kings as having two versions. The first edition of this king was from the late 7th century BCE, and the second and final edition, as we know it now, from the 6th century BCE. It means that the biblical account of a Syrian military campaign was written about a century or two after Judah was nearly captured, and after the siege of Jerusalem. In contrast, the Sennacherib prism was made shortly after the event. So, how do we reconcile these two accounts? On the one hand, the book of Kings refers to the same historical event, mentioning the same names and dates, but on the other hand, the evaluation and understanding of what happened and why it happened are very different in these two sources. The Assyrian source is the account of winners, and the Jewish source is the account of those who lost that war and had to give away everything valuable, all valuable possessions, in exchange for peace. This example poses important questions to all of us. What does it mean to be a winner or a loser? The Jewish perspective on the Assyrian invasion is fascinating. On the one hand, it records truthful facts, dates and names that corresponds to the Assyrian account. But on the other hand, it creates a legend of a miracle that occurred and saved Judeans. The Hebrew Bible is therefore not a 100% accurate historical account, but a collective memory and legend with a powerful message. Perhaps it says, maybe we didn't win that war. Maybe we had to pay a high price, literally. But on the other hand, many years later, the Assyrian Empire disappeared. And we are still here. And this applies to many other moments in Jewish history. Where is Babylonian Empire now? And where are the ancient Persian, Greek, and Roman empires that are in the core of some other stories in the Hebrew Bible? Everything depends on your perspective, and sometimes you need to take a step back to look at the events from a very long distance to understand them better. The Joseph story is another example of such approach. Was it good for Jews that they moved to Egypt? Well, it depends on perspective. The same move that saved Jacob's family from starvation also led to 300 years of slavery. On the other hand, we can take a step back and say that this slavery and the future liberation and exodus became the formative story for our people. And it's fascinating to read prayers today, because we say, you delivered us from Egypt, you led us out of the house of bondage. And now we are reading the beginning of the story. So where does it end? The best we know in Judaism today is the result of disasters and consequent lessons, changes and improvements that the Jewish people had to make after these disasters. In her recent book, Greta Thunberg wrote this. The book is about climate, but the conclusion applies to everything. Right now, she writes, we are in desperate need of hope. But hope is not about pretending that everything will be fine. It's not about sticking your head in the sand or listening to fairy tales about non-existent technological solutions. It's not about loopholes or clever accounting. To me, she writes, hope is not something that is given to you. It is something that you have to earn, to create. It cannot be gained passively through standing by and waiting for someone else to do something. Hope is taking action. Hope is a verb. Winning in an argument, winning a battle or war is not enough. Winning can lead to subsequent failure, but a loss can be the best motivation to rethink your priorities and improve. Life is complex and far from easy. Life will always present us with challenges and battles. It's impossible to judge today's life unless we use it as a lesson for tomorrow. From this perspective, tomorrow is now. We live in a historical time with many arguments, battles, and wars. We are in desperate need of hope. So let's be authors of our own history and do our best to deserve and earn the hope we need so much now. Shabbat Shalom.